Hello, and thank you for logging on to the Foundation for Physician Advancement podcast channel in partnership with Convey Med. FPA is a nonprofit built for and run by Marney Reid and a group of dedicated physician educators. Our mission is to help physicians build a successful practice in today's healthcare setting through the development of your leadership skills and business acumen. I'm Marney Reid, Executive Director, and we hope you enjoy today's discussion. This episode was recorded live at one of our Building a Successful Practice courses, so please pardon any background noise and conference references. In this episode, I moderate a discussion on leading through influence, the importance of emotional quotient, also known as EQ, with faculty Dr. Cynthia Emory, Dr. Bryan Springer, and Dr. Jessica Woodcock.
Okay, so we're on the home stretch, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking with us. We are on the last one prior to releasing you to all of the amazing skills labs that our sponsors have. Thank you so much for the faculty. Today's topic is not necessarily the sexiest thing, but it's definitely something that everyone really should work on, especially if you have any desires to take any kind of leadership position, whether it's in your practice, in your health system, or even amongst societies that you may want to join or become a board of. To start with, I would love for my amazing faculty and panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get going on this exciting content. Dr. Emory.
Hi, Cynthia Emory. I'm a professor and vice chair of Department of Orthopedic Surgery at Wake Forest Baptist Health.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bryan Springer. I'm at the Ortho Carolina Hip and Knee Center in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hi, I'm Jessica Woodcock. I've been in practice for 10 years and currently hospital employed at Carolina East Health System.
Awesome. Well, thank you, panelists. Let's jump into it. So, discussion topics: what is EQ? How does it affect your work? Feedback is a gift. Anyone in the corporate setting will probably have heard this several times right before they're delivered, basically a stomach punch. And then EQ resources. So emotional quotient, also known as emotional intelligence, really started becoming widely discussed in the professional community in the 90s, with the publication of studies showcasing that people with high EQ and an average IQ outperformed high IQ low EQ 70% of the time. This was a global study, although we don't necessarily know if physicians were included in it, but still pertinent, and I think when the faculty go into their stories, we'll hear how it can translate over to the medical world. Prior to these findings, it was really just assumed if you had high IQ, you were going to be a high performer, you were the people that we wanted to promote, and people who were going to make good managers. So emotional intelligence, for those who haven't taken an EQ test, is actually something that you can continue to augment throughout the course of your career. Your IQ actually stops going up at the age of 15. So sorry, but everyone in the audience, we're stuck with what we got right now, because I don't think anyone is Doogie Howser and snuck in here at the age of 15. Things like emotional intelligence, where you look at earning potential. And once again, I don't know that this is necessarily pertinent to surgeons. However, it still is pertinent when you want to take on a chair position, or if you want to become a president of a major society. In one study, EQ was tested against 33 other important workplace skills and found that EQ is the strongest performance indicator. And when you look at earning potential, people with a higher EQ earn about $30,000 roughly more than people with a lower EQ. And if you want to really get granular, per point EQ that you are raising, you can make around $1,300 more annually. Once again, this was a study done across multiple industries and globally, but we're not necessarily sure that physicians were factored into it. When it comes to do with leadership and EQ, I think my corporate friends in the room will laugh. If you've ever looked at someone, or you yourself have been someone where you hit all of your numbers, you're hitting your KPIs, you're hitting all of your revenue, you're doing everything that you feel you can, you've ramped up your cases in the right amount of time, and you don't know why you're not getting those leadership opportunities that you feel like you should have, it's probably because you haven't necessarily developed some or multiple factors of your EQ. So let's talk about the 5 different components that are comprised when you take an EQ test. So the first one is self-awareness. Do you understand how your reactions your emotions, even if you say nothing, the energy that you emit affects you, the team, and anyone around you who either has to work with you or who you are the leader for. Self-regulation, identifying, so once you figure out that, yes, actually, my emotions, my energy does affect those around me, can you self-regulate? So when you feel like you're going from a 1 to a 10 real quick, can you calm yourself down and say, you know what, I need to get through this. I can do whatever I need to do in my own free time later, but self-regulate. You know who didn't self-regulate was Brian Culp and I when we didn't go to sleep at 10 p.m. last night like we were supposed to. But that's okay because we made it down here. Empathy. What I love is we are hearing more and more about empathy, and especially for orthopedics. I think it's a wonderful thing that demonstrating and encouraging empathy, which is really, you don't have to understand what they're going through. You don't have to feel like it's a good reason, but you have to be able to see someone else's point of view with why they may be reacting to a situation a certain way, or why they may or may not be pulling the weight that you feel they should, etc. Motivation. Do you show up every day happy about what you're doing, no matter what's going on in your personal life, although we all can trip up and make some mistakes? And do you motivate, not only keep yourself motivated, do you motivate those around you? And then social skills. Good news is this is orthopedics and not neurosurgery. Sorry if anyone from neurosurgery is listening in. So probably pretty good social skills. We're team mentality here. But social skills past just, whoever wins the beer pong championship tonight or whoever comes out with the most friends after this. Social skills being, do you understand that the entire team needs to feel like they're included, and do you bring them along with you? Okay, the ripple effect. Dr. Woodcock, can you talk about some examples of the ripple effect and how EQ affects everyone in the room, especially as it relates to patient care?
Absolutely. The ripple effect is very powerful, and as a surgeon, as a professional, you have the power to guide the mood and the productivity of your room, your clinic. Just because you're having a bad day, you do not have to be in a bad mood. So you go in the OR, you're annoyed there was no physician parking. You were annoyed that all they have are the red bouffant caps. The patient isn't in the OR yet, and the CRNA is already on a coffee break. The scrub tech in the room says, "Good morning." Squeak out a good morning, and maybe a, "How was your weekend?" This will go a long ways. Conversely, if you just kind of grunt and say, "What's so great about it?" that scrub tech is not committed. They're gonna think you're ungrateful, you're not happy to be there. Also, they're gonna be potentially intimidated. And in the OR, it's very important to develop a safe space where you are approachable. They can ask you questions to keep the process going in the OR. Because if they're afraid to ask you what you need, you're not gonna have what you need, and there's gonna be a delay. Your scrub tech is gonna take a break in the middle of cementing. So you have the ability to get everybody on the same team. You have to figure out what makes them tick.
Love that. So scrub techs are people too, is what I got out of that one. Dr. Springer, you teach residents and fellows. You sit on the board of multiple societies, as well as this year's AUKUS president. And in my personal experience working with you on various different projects, I've seen a very high level of EQ displayed in numerous situations, although I will say, the very first time I sat on a panel with Dr. Springer, he was talking about how to self-regulate, and he says, what I do now, and it saves me from getting in a lot of troubles, when something comes across on email or text that just has me seeing red, I ignore it for 24 hours. So every time you take more than 24 hours or such to respond to me, I start freaking out. So can you share with the audience how you've built your EQ over the years and what you feel helped with that upward trajectory?
Yeah, thanks, Marnie. It's, I always think whether you want to be or not in our position, we're all leaders in some sense of the word, right? Doesn't mean you have to lead an organization. You're a leader in your office, you're a leader in your OR. And I think number one is just understanding that. I always say as I've read, there's three things you need to be a good leader, right? EQ, IQ, and FQ. Right? You have to have your emotional quotient, you have to have your intellect, and you have to have your financial quotient, which is what we've been talking quite a bit. And as you mentioned, that EQ is the most important part of, I think, being a leader of a team. And the great thing about it is, oftentimes, unlike IQ, is it's teachable and you can learn it, right? It's something that you can learn over time, despite the fact that, you know, you fall into one of the big 5 personality categories. That doesn't necessarily change. Human nature doesn't change a whole lot. You can actually train and learn emotional intelligence. And, you know, a lot of us have learned it, unfortunately, the hard way, right? By example or things that you've done wrong, but you can train yourself. And I view EQ kind of simplistically as how you read a room and how you read yourself internally. And those are kind of the 2 things I think about when I think about EQ.
Reading the room, a great line, very applicable to really any situation. So show of hands here, who has ever had to deliver feedback to someone, either you're mentoring or someone that you are responsible because they report to you, and it's not feedback that you know is going to make their day? And then on the converse side, who has been on the receiving end of feedback where afterwards, and as you develop your career, you thought that was really a gift, it really helped, but it did not feel good when it was being delivered? So Dr. Emory, as someone who mentors multiple people, can you go into the concept of what good looks like when you are on the receiving end? So in other words, if you've got a junior attending, you've pulled them in your office to help them with something, you deliver what you know is going to be a hard conversation, what is the ideal scenario for you as the mentee and the person delivering that feedback?
I think the hardest part about receiving feedback is trying not to be defensive and be hurt and take it personally. And I think that just comes with time and with experience. Understanding that the information that you're receiving is because someone believes in you and they're investing in you and that they want you to be successful. And so this information, while it may be difficult to hear in the moment, especially if your heart rate's going up, you're feeling, your face might be turning red, you're having all these reactions, kind of visceral reactions, right? That's your amygdala hijack that you guys may have heard about before. I think it's important to really think about, instead of having a reflexive response, is to say, thank you for sharing that with me. I'd like some time to think about this. Can we talk again in a couple of days? And just leave it at that. You don't want to leave the room where you maybe had tried to explain away everything, blame somebody else for whatever happened. Really take some time to process the information that you just received, remove the emotion from it, and say, what can I learn from this?
Removing the emotion, that's something so critical to being coachable, but isn't always easy to do. Dr. Springer, as an ex-athlete, sorry, the Peloton does not count. It is not a recognized sport, yet curling is. Can you go over what the term uncoachable in the surgeon world means and the ramifications to a surgeon, especially a junior partner, or even maybe a fellow who's looking to get help finding a job, is if they are deemed uncoachable?
Yeah, so I think you can look at uncoachable in 2 different lights. One is, if you take myself as an example. I mean, I could go out and practice basketball for 24 hours a day and I'll never be Michael Jordan, right? That's a talent genetic combination type of thing that you either have it or you don't. And most surgeons that I think get this far in training, with some exceptions, have that ability from a technical perspective to be able to be coached and learn and move through and become proficient and safe at doing surgery. It's rare, I think, that we come across someone who doesn't fit into that category from a coachable perspective. The other side of that is the uncoachable EQ, if you want to say that, right? The people that can't control their emotions, the people that don't know how to read a room, the people that don't understand the importance of everybody else that is around them from a team perspective. And I think those are some of the hardest conversations that I've had with trainees, residents, fellows, is bringing them in and sitting them down and making them understand how their interactions every day with their everyday teammates and team members affect their lives directly, and then also all those lives around them. So it's people that don't understand that emotional aspect of of again, empathy and understanding other people's thoughts and feelings, and that they're important parts of the team and they're professionals, and surrounding yourself with important and talented people that bring things into the mix that you don't offer is probably some of the hardest things that I've seen in people, that getting them to recognize that makes them uncoachable.
Yeah, it's very easy to get, so myopic into, I've got a patient on the table, I'm new out into practice, I'm, maybe not admitting it, but I'm completely scared because I know I don't have an attending down the hall or across the field from me, and yet being able to do all of those 5 things, and then when someone pulls you aside and wants to help you, because that's all they're doing. No one wants to have that conversation where they walk and go, that ruined their day, awesome, I'm getting a sandwich. That's not how people deliver feedback. They actually care enough about you to be willing to have that conversation. Dr. Woodcock, I loved the illustrative example that you gave. We talk a lot about feedback back and forth with physician, between physician. How about that staff member, right? That one who, is always chit-chatting it up in the lounge and kind of causing little rifts between people. How does, especially an early career surgeon that's building their brand and just trying to get things up and running, what advice do you give them on being able to coach, a staff member up?
You have to read the room. You have to figure out what makes them tick. And frankly, some people operate for different things, whether or not I'm completely open to bribing with food. And I would say share your expectations. If people know what your goals are, they're generally much more willing to work with you and for you. It's not just that I'm complaining about the turnover time, it's that frankly, we all want to get out of here and be at home with our children's baseball game at 5:30. Now, I found that a lot of the staff feel the same way, and they feel like while they're there working, it is a job, but they also want to enjoy it and be part of a team, to be part of something. And if they know your goals, many times they're on board.
Yeah, and enlist them in the cause, right? Get them excited about it, have them understand, and then the reward system. I think we all like food. I'm a French fry person, salt-free, so if we ever get into it, just McDonald's salt-free fries, just a little helpful hint there. So in the show notes, there is a copy of this deck for those who are simply able to listen. On this page that I'm referencing right now, we have some different resources that you can use for those of you who actually want to start working on your EQ. So at FPA, one of the beautiful things about our courses is we're very candid, right? You get to hear some people that you read their literature or you do interviews with talk about the things that they did wrong and they are continuing to work on. So in the spirit of transparency, we're going to go across the board, but we're actually going to start with me on what was the moment when it hit you, whether you really needed to work on EQ or just needed to do some fine-tune adjustments. So anyone who has worked with me ever over the course of the last 15 years of my career in healthcare knows that I get really excited about things. The ADHD kicks in, and I can sometimes need to read the room or self-regulate a little better. So I'm actually going to tell a story about back when I was a surgical device rep. I've been in the field for a few years. I won all the awards. I continued to hit my number year after year with a growth product. In other words, baseline plus growth every year, so not exactly easy. I took my technology into, every type of case that was applicable, and I just felt like I should be promoted. Why wasn't I being picked to be on, some of these committees that senior leadership would? And, I was doing all of the right things, right? And so I asked for, some feedback. We did some 360s. For those of you in the room not familiar, a 360 is a peer-to-peer as well as friend review. So you submit X amount of names. They also talk to your manager and a couple other people in leadership positions, and they give you that feedback where it's a kick in the stomach, right? And so the feedback that came across consistently was, person we want on our team because she'll help us win, person we never want to have to work with because she's a complete pain in the ass. I read a book that changed my life. It's Cy Wakeman's Reality-Based Rules of the Workplace. And it's an equation that says your value to an organization is your current performance plus your talent level minus 3 times your emotional expensiveness. So you can pause, you can Google emotional expensiveness. Turns out I was the Christian Dior of emotional expensive. Marketing launched something, I didn't like the way they did it, I thought I could have done it better. Actually couldn't, but I thought I could, and I let everyone know how I felt about it. Some new initiative was rolled out and it didn't benefit me and my territory. I poo-pooed it on calls. I didn't go forward with it. What I didn't realize was because of the accolades I had won, I was viewed as a leader already in the organization, and I was detrimental to key initiatives being rolled out. So I had a really hard conversation with a mentor. I got off the phone and literally cried for like 4 minutes, and then I started getting some books. I started working on it. I started asking people to give me feedback, and I'm always going to work on it, right? I'm still going to on occasion say something where I have to send an apology text at 6 a.m. the next morning to a group of people or something, but at least I have been made aware of it. I started getting promotions. I started getting pulled onto leadership. You don't have to be perfect, but you have to be willing to get better. So who wants to go next?
I'll go. So my aha moment, I suppose you could say, was also related to a 360 that I had. I was medical director of our clinics I was pretty early into practice. I was like 3 years into practice, and Walt Curl had retired, and so I became the medical director, and I didn't know what a medical director did. And so as part of that, we did 360s. And so I had some evaluations from some of my peers, from some of our managers, from people outside of orthopedics. And then you get that summary report that talks about all the things that people think that you do well, and then maybe some other characteristics that are some opportunities for improvement. And a consistent theme that I saw from people in the department and outside the department was that I was perceived as cold and aloof. And I saw this and I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, I'm a nice person. I smile, I ask people how they're doing. And so this just really took me by surprise, and I really had such a blind spot. So then I talked to some of my friends and some of my peers and people that I trusted, and I said, I asked, like, please help me understand why I'm being perceived this way. And so what I learned is when I would have a meeting, the meeting started at 1, we'd start the meeting at 1. I wanted to be respectful of people's time, so I was a jump into business kind of person. I am not the person who will ask you, what'd you do last weekend? Tell me about stuff you like, blah, 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 building. But I realized that I was not effective in building relationships with people who are relationship-based. And so I was not very effective as a leader. So now I try to ask those questions. I don't particularly care, but I will ask those questions because it's important to that person to build those relationships. That's just not really how I'm wired, but it was important for me to recognize that there are other people that are motivated based on relationships.
Okay, Dr. Woodcock.
I don't feel like I've gotten as much feedback as I would have liked over the years. But I got the most feedback. I have a low EQ story that helped tailor me into what I've been doing over the past year or so. A tale of two surgeons. I find that I get very frustrated with inefficiencies and laziness. I get heated. My heart rate goes up, and I want to fix it, and I will lash out. That doesn't really help the team atmosphere, the turnover time, because I tried for about 9 years to fix the turnover time doing that, and it didn't work. On the other hand, very similar, there's a surgeon that's been there for 10 years my senior, and when he first started, he was just like me. And he lashed out for 3-4 years. The scrub tech said that he was ungrateful. They didn't like him. He was a jerk. So one day, he was frustrated with the turnover time, and he grabbed a mop. He's like, turnover time is so slow, I'm gonna do it myself. I can do it just as well, and somebody will take this mop away because they'll be embarrassed and wouldn't let the surgeon clean the floor. 10 years later, he is still mopping that floor. You have to get people invested. The most difficult circulator scrub tech, I try my hardest to be nice, and I think it's working. But I'll keep trying.
7 years later.
7 years later.
All right, progress. That's all we ask, progress, right?
Yeah, so there's good ways to mop the floor and bad ways to mop the floor. He did it to prove a negative point, right? As opposed to be part of the team and help out and get things done, right? That's a really good example. Gosh, I have so many examples of where I've screwed up from an EQ perspective. I would say just kind of in general, and also to complement what Cynthia and Jessica have said, would be more centered around controlling your emotions And as my wife always says to my kids, you are the only one that controls your emotions, how you're going to act and how you're going to act today. And she will send my kids up to their room and make them sit in their room until they come down with a smile on their face. And she does it all the time with them. And it makes me think of it. She's right. I mean, we are truly the only ones that control our emotions and our responses to situations. Nobody else does, and we have that control over it. I always say if there's one button that I could break off of my computer, it would be the reply to all button. And that's where I've gotten myself into trouble in the past, and hence the evolution of my 24-hour rule for messages and emails, which is there was a group email that came out to our entire Ortho Carolina group in the hospital staff that I just, raised the hair on the back of my neck, and I typed out this really incredulous reply in there and didn't even think about it and hit the reply to all button to everybody that was on there. This is probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it really came back to bite me in a negative way. And you get responses. I said, well, I didn't say that. There it is, right down in the email for the 75 recipients that received the email. So that it just speaks to that whole issue of controlling your emotions. And if there is something like Cynthia mentioned, if you're in a discussion with somebody, take time, come back. Right, so I do the same thing. If I get an email that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, I type out the response and I put it in my saved box, and I come back and look at it 24 hours, and 90% of the time I never send it, or I just delete it. I think there is this societal pressure that you have to respond to things immediately, right, and you don't take time to step back and think about your responses or think about whether or not you're saying is actually constructive or not, but you're just trying to beat it to the punch by responding right away. And I think that's part of what has been created by emails and text messages and all that, and all those types of things.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more. I'm certainly also a fan of the draft email. I think just getting it out makes a big difference. As long as you don't do reply or reply all. Like, I'm a big fan of creating a draft where there's nobody in the to section. Mm-hmm. Let's talk for a couple minutes about what are some of those real-time tactics when emotion is high and you're having a very difficult, you're engaged and you have like that fight or flight response. What are some things that you guys have found successful in the moment? Because telling someone to calm down usually is not the best advice.
I will say that one of the things that I learned is most of the arguments come from just a miscommunication, right? You're projecting your mood, your current biases about the person or just the genre of people, right? So like if anesthesia is emailing you or, the surgery schedule or whatnot. Seeking to understand was a big theme at one of the companies I work for, and assuming best intent. So simply replying where you need to reply and say, can we unpack this a little bit? So in corporate speak, that just means, can you elaborate a little bit? Can you explain, where you're coming from or what you're thinking and that kind of stuff, because they may come back with something that you totally did not expect that makes you go, oh yeah, okay. So that's one of the tactics I try to use.
Yeah, I think that's great. That there's a great book out there, if you haven't read it, called Crucial Conversations, right? That really talks about having difficult conversations with people, and part of having difficult conversations with people is just getting everything out on the table, right? So people feel comfortable and safe being able to share their side of the story, right? That you can have a disagreement without being disagreeable, right? I think that's right. And everything is so instantaneous responses nowadays that taking the step back and trying to listen and understand what the other person's point of view is I think is so important in these conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I think Crucial Conversations is really a great book. It's an easy read, and there's great little vignettes. And as you read some of those stories in there, you're like, oh, I know who that is, or oh, I've done that. And I really thought it was very, very helpful. Some of the tactics in that book also are about help me understand, restating what you think you just heard. Sometimes that gives you enough time to, even if you're totally seething with anger, to take a few breaths and be able to center yourself so that you're not so reactive. I've also occasionally had conversations with people where I have said, I am so angry right now, I need to come back and talk with you tomorrow. And I've turned around and walked off. Because I don't regret saying that. but I might regret anything else that comes out of my mouth after that. And so it's really being able to hold yourself in check and having that emotional control. Because I get revved, when I get upset, I get revved up. And you can tell when I'm upset, I'm visibly upset. And so I don't like looking that way when I'm about to engage with somebody else. And so I really, really try to keep that in check. And sometimes you just have to walk away and come back later.
Thank you again for listening in. We hope you enjoyed the discussion with our FPA faculty. If you'd like to learn more about our mission or upcoming events, please visit our website at www.buildingasuccessfulpractice.org.